Jack Cooper couldn't help but smirk as Professor Zilithix droned on about the absolute perfection of Arcturian quantum harmonics. The holographic display above the lecturer's head showed the crystalline matrix of their latest drive system. Beautiful, symmetrical, and in Jack's opinion, about as practical as a glass hammer. His stylus moved across his tablet, adding subtle modifications to the schematic he copied down. A little turbulence here, some controlled chaos there. The other students, a mix of various species from across the United Galactic Alliance, sat ramrod straight in their seats, taking notes with religious devotion. Jack slouched further in his reinforced chair, specially designed for Deathworlders like himself, and added another modification that would make any Arcturian engineer faint. The quantum fold drive represents 3 centuries of perfect engineering. Zilithix's translucent appendages rippled with pride. Each crystal lattice is grown over a period of 50 years to ensure 0 imperfections. The classroom's emergency lights suddenly flared crimson. The AI's voice cut through the professor's lecture with cold precision. Warning. Class 1 emergency. Arcturian diplomatic vessel ISS Eternal Harmony experiencing critical drive failure. Impact with lunar base Alpha predicted in 28 minutes. The classroom erupted into chaos. Well-organized chaos. His alien classmates began pulling up emergency procedures on their tablets, each one following the exact protocols they'd memorized. Jack, however, was already moving. He grabbed his toolkit from under his desk, a battered metal box covered in Detroit Lion stickers that had seen more engine grease than quantum particles. Cadet Cooper. Professor Zilithix's voice cracked like a whip. Return to your station. Emergency protocols clearly state. With all due respect, Professor, Jack hefted his toolkit. By the time we finish reading the protocols, that ship's gonna be scattered across half the moon. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Ambassador Kvex on that vessel? The one heading to the Galactic Peace Summit. The professor's appendages twisted in distress. The proper response teams are 6 hours away at best, Jack finished, already heading for the door. And those hostile Drachnid ships we detected at the edge of the system this morning. Bet they'd love to get their claws on a stranded Arcturian ambassador. This is highly irregular. The quantum fold drive is the most sophisticated piece of engineering in the known galaxy. A human couldn't possibly. Yeah, we're primitive Deathworlders who barely figured out fusion power, Jack called over his shoulder. But you know what we did figure out. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution isn't the right one. Sometimes you just need someone crazy enough to try the impossible. He was running now, his Deathworlder physique letting him move faster than any of his alien classmates could hope to match. The emergency lighting cast everything in a bloody glow as he sprinted through the Academy's corridors, his mind already racing through possibilities. The quantum fold drive was failing, but why? The Arcturians built redundancy upon redundancy into their systems, yet somehow, Jack burst through the observation deck doors just in time to see the Eternal Harmony streak across the lunar sky, its crystalline hull pulsing with sickly rainbow patterns. The ship was bleeding energy in a way he'd never seen before, but something about that pulse pattern looked familiar. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes, kid, the fanciest diagnostic computer in the world won't tell you what your eyes and ears already know. Listen to the engine. Feel it. It'll tell you what's wrong. Jack pressed his hand against the reinforced window, feeling the vibrations coming through the structure of the moon base itself. His eyes widened as recognition hit him. Well, I'll be damned, he whispered, already running toward the emergency airlock. It's not a drive failure at all. It's resonance cascade. They built it too perfect. The emergency airlock cycled far too slowly for Jack's taste. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see the Eternal Harmony's landing struts struggling to deploy, its crystalline hull fracturing, in patterns that would give an Arcturian engineer nightmares. He double-checked the seals on his emergency vac suit, Another primitive human design that had scandalized his alien classmates with its reliance on mechanical backups instead of pure energy shielding. Cadet Cooper. Ambassador Kvex's hologram materialized beside him. All four eyes narrowed in what Jack had learned was the Arcturian expression of extreme disapproval. Your presence here violates 17 different emergency protocols. Return to your designated safety zone immediately. Jack continued checking his toolkit. With all respect, Ambassador, I count about 12 minutes before your ship's quantum cascade turns that perfect crystal hull into the galaxy's most expensive light show. How long does the emergency manual say it takes to safely power down a Class 9 harmonizer? 15 minutes. Kvex's facial tentacles writhed. Under optimal conditions, which we don't have. Jack snapped his toolkit shut. So either I try something extremely stupid, or we watch 3 centuries of Arcturian engineering become moon dust. Your call. The ambassador's hologram flickered as another energy surge rocked the ship. You cannot possibly understand. The quantum fold drive represents the pinnacle of our civilization. Each crystal matrix is grown in zero-gravity conditions, calibrated to perfection across 11 dimensions. And that's exactly the problem. Jack interrupted, an idea crystallizing. You built it too perfect. Real space isn't perfect, Ambassador. It's messy, chaotic, full of quantum fluctuations that your drive is trying to eliminate instead of work with. The airlock finally cycled green. Jack grabbed his magnetic grapple, another primitive tool that had earned him demerits in Space Rescue class for not using the standard gravitic tethers. Kvex's hologram followed him, its projection growing increasingly distorted by the quantum interference. This is absurd. What could a human possibly know about quantum engineering that 3 centuries of Arcturian science hasn't already perfected? Jack shot his grapple toward the ship's hull, the magnetic head locking onto a relatively stable section. Well, for starters, I know that my dad's old Mustang taught me more about harmonic resonance than all your quantum textbooks. Sometimes, the solution isn't to eliminate vibration. It's to make it work for you. He launched himself across the void, the magnetic line reeling him in as chunks of crystal began breaking away from the Eternal Harmony's hull. The ship's emergency fields were barely containing the atmosphere, creating a shimmer in space that reminded Jack of heat waves off hot asphalt. This is madness. Kvex's voice crackled through his comm. The quantum harmonizer requires perfect alignment, perfect crystal structure. Perfect. Nothing's perfect, Ambassador, Jack grunted as he landed on the hull, his magnetic boots engaging. And trying to make it perfect is what's tearing your ship apart. These energy patterns, they're exactly like what happens when you try to tune an engine to eliminate all vibration. It fights back. He reached the emergency access panel, which was already cracking from stress. The quantum cascade was getting worse. He could feel the vibrations through his boots, a discordant rhythm that was rapidly approaching critical frequency. The maintenance protocols clearly state, protocols won't save your ship. Jack pulled out his oldest, most reliable wrench, the one his father had given him on his 16th birthday. Sometimes you need to stop fighting the chaos and learn to dance with it instead. Kvex's hologram watched in horror as Jack began manually overriding the panel's perfect crystalline circuitry. You're going to kill us all, human. Maybe. Jack grinned beneath his helmet as the panel finally yielded. But at least I'll do it in style. Now, let me show you what a Deathworlder mechanic can do with 30 minutes and a trusty wrench. The quantum drive's housing lay before him, its perfect surfaces already showing signs of the underlying resonance problem. Jack cracked his knuckles. Time to introduce a little controlled chaos into all this perfection. The quantum drive chamber was a cathedral of light and crystal, or at least it should have been. Right now, it looked more like a disco having a seizure. Fractals of energy spiraled through the air, creating patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't symptoms of imminent catastrophic failure. Don't move. Kvex's hologram followed Jack as he made his way down the maintenance gantry. The slightest disruption to the quantum field cooled. A surge of energy crackled across the chamber, causing the ship's artificial gravity to fluctuate wildly. Jack's magnetic boots kept him anchored while the ambassador's hologram flickered and distorted. Could what? Make things worse. Jack pulled out his handheld scanner, a modified Academy diagnostic tool that had earned him a week's detention when his instructors discovered the improvements he'd made. Because from where I'm standing, we've already hit the worst button and kept on pushing. The scanner's display showed exactly what he'd feared. The quantum fold drive's crystal matrix was experiencing cascading harmonic failure across all 11 dimensions it operated in. The Arcturian solution would have been to try damping out the vibrations entirely, a bit like trying to stop its tsunami by building a bigger wall. The quantum harmonizer is experiencing impossible readings. Kivex's voice crackled with static. Our sensors can't even process. That's because your sensors are too perfect, Jack interrupted, studying the scanner's output. They're designed to measure perfect quantum states. But this, he gestured at the chaos around them. This is about as far from perfect as you can get. Another surge rocked the ship. Through his boots, Jack felt a rhythm that reminded him of an engine about to throw a rod. But there was something else there too, a pattern in the chaos that tickled at the edge of his understanding. The emergency containment protocols won't work, Jack finished, moving closer to the drive housing. Because they're trying to force order onto chaos. We need to work with the chaos instead. He pressed his hand directly against the crystal housing, ignoring Kivex's shriek of horror. The vibrations told him everything the alien sensors couldn't. Each pulse, each fluctuation, spoke to him in a language he'd learned at his father's knee, bent over the engines of countless vehicles. The quantum drive wasn't just failing. It was searching for a natural rhythm, fighting against the perfect prison the Arcturians had built for it. Impossible. Kivex gasped as Jack's scanner displayed its findings. The quantum state can't be oscillating like that. It defies all known laws off. All known Arcturian laws, Jack corrected, already pulling tools from his kit. But chaos theory. That's something we humans wrote the book on. And right now, your drive isn't failing because it's imperfect. It's failing because it can't handle being perfect. He grabbed his wrench and began removing the access panel to the main crystal matrix. The metal tool looked absurdly primitive next to the advanced alien technology. But Jack knew something the Arcturians had forgotten. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. What are you doing? Kivex demanded as Jack reached into the housing. Those crystals took 50 years to grow. They're calibrated to fight against the natural quantum fluctuations of spacetime, Jack finished. But what if instead of fighting them, we surfed them? Like turning a car's suspension into an active part of the handling, instead of just trying to eliminate all road feel. His fingers found what he was looking for, the primary resonance crystal, the heart of the quantum fold drive. In the flickering light, he could see the microscopic fractures already forming in its perfect surface. Time to get a little dirty, Jack muttered, pulling out his toolkit's most controversial item. A crystal etching pen he'd modified using techniques that would make any Arcturian engineer need immediate medical attention. Ambassador, you might want to look away. This is going to hurt your sensibilities a lot more than it hurts the ship. It was time to introduce a little controlled chaos into the system. After all, as his father always said, sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly. Stop. Kivex's hologram flared so brightly it cast shadows through the quantum storm. That etching tool, it's not rated for quantum crystalline matrices. The resonance pattern's cold. Jack was already working, his modified pen carving precise patterns into the crystal surface. Could what? Create quantum turbulence. That's exactly what we want. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours working on engines where one mistake meant explosion. The problem isn't the turbulence, it's that your system can't handle it. To demonstrate, he pulled up a holographic diagram from his scanner. Look here, your quantum matrix is trying to maintain perfect stability across all dimensions, But space-time itself isn't stable. It's like, he searched for an analogy the ambassador would understand. It's like trying to build a perfectly rigid bridge. Looks great on paper, but in reality, a particularly violent surge rocked the ship. The artificial gravity flickered, and somewhere above them, more crystal plating shattered. In reality, Jack continued, etching another precise line. You need flexibility. Give a bridge some sway, and it'll survive an earthquake that would shatter a rigid one. Same principle here, just with quantum mechanics instead of civil engineering. Kvex's facial tentacles writhed in patterns that Jack's xenobiology courses suggested indicated both fascination and horror. But the harmonics, the patterns you're etching, are based on Earth's naturally occurring crystal structures, Jack confirmed, not looking up from his work. We call them crystal whiskers, imperfect formations that actually make the overall structure stronger. Found that out the hard way in the early days of microelectronics. He moved to another section of the crystal, his etching pen leaving traces that glowed with an inner light. The patterns weren't random. They followed the natural stress lines he could feel through his gloved hands, creating channels for the quantum turbulence to flow through instead of fighting against. This is madness, Kvex whispered, but Jack noticed the ambassador wasn't trying to stop him anymore. You're intentionally introducing chaos into the most precise quantum engine ever created. Controlled chaos, Jack corrected, finishing another pattern. Like the turbulent flow in a jet engine. Fight against it, and it tears your engine apart. Work with it. He stepped back, admiring his handiwork. The etched patterns had begun to pulse in sync with the drive's natural resonance. A new alarm blared through the chamber. Hostile ships detected, the ship's AI announced. Drachnid vessels approaching at sublight speeds. Estimated time to weapons range, 15 minutes. Perfect timing, Jack muttered. He pulled out his wrench again, the old-fashioned one his father had given him. Ambassador, remember how I said sometimes you need to break something to fix it? Kvex's hologram flickered nervously. You cannot possibly mean toe. Structural integrity at 15% and falling. The AI helpfully added. Jack hefted the wrench. The crystals fighting the new resonance patterns. Needs a little persuasion. He grinned at the ambassador's horrified expression. Don't worry, this is exactly how we fixed the quantum fluctuation problems in Earth's first FTL drives. Well, technically it was an accident involving a drop tool, but we learned from it. This is impossible, Kvex protested weakly. The mathematical probabilities of success are exactly why humans made it into space, Jack interrupted. He positioned the wrench carefully against a specific point in the crystal matrix, a spot where his etched patterns converge. We don't care about impossible odds. We just do what needs to be done. He took a deep breath, feeling the quantum resonance through his boots, through his suit, timing it just right. Ambassador, you might want to mute your visual sensors for this next part, and maybe say a prayer to whatever deity invented mechanical engineering. Before Kvex could protest further, Jack swung the wrench. The sound it made connecting with the crystal matrix was either the beginning of their salvation or the start of a spectacular failure. Either way, as his father always said, sometimes you just have to commit to the repair and hope you calculated the breaking point correctly. The sound of the wrench striking crystal reverberated through the chamber like a church bell, announcing either salvation or doom. For one eternal second, nothing happened. Then, by the first light, Kvex's hologram stuttered as the quantum patterns throughout the drive chamber shifted. The chaos of conflicting resonances suddenly aligned, flowing through Jack's etched channels like water finding its natural course. Ha! Jack's triumphant laugh echoed through his helmet. Look at that flow pattern. It's just like a turbocharged engine hitting its sweet spot. The quantum energy was no longer fighting the crystal matrix, but working with it, creating a self-sustaining harmonic that made the air shimmer with rainbow patterns. Impossible, Kvex whispered. The quantum readings, they're stabilizing, but in a way our theories say cannot exist. The turbulence should be tearing the matrix apart. And yet it's making it stronger. Jack finished, already moving to the next phase. He pulled out what looked like a jury-rigged combination of Earth tech and salvaged alien components, like how a tree grows stronger in the wind. Now comes the fun part. More fun than deliberately damaging a priceless quantum matrix. Kivex's voice had taken on a slightly hysterical edge. Much more. Jack began attaching his device to key points along the crystal surface. See, those channels we etched. They're not just directing the quantum turbulence. They're amplifying it. Using it. Like turning a car's turbo-waste energy into extra power. Another alarm blared. Drachnid vessels entering weapons range in 10 minutes, the AI announced helpfully. Plenty of time, Jack muttered, making final adjustments. His hands moved with practiced precision, each motion calculated despite the apparent recklessness. You know what the real problem with your quantum drive was, Ambassador. It wasn't just that it was too perfect. It was that it was afraid of its own power. Kivex's hologram flickered. Afraid? The quantum fold drive is a machine. It cannot. Figure of speech, Jack interrupted, connecting the last component. But think about it. All that energy, all that potential, and you spent centuries trying to contain it, control it, make it behave exactly how you wanted. But quantum mechanics doesn't work that way. Sometimes you need to. He grinned. Let it rip. He activated his device. Immediately, the quantum patterns throughout the chamber intensified. The crystal matrix began humming at a frequency that made Jack's teeth vibrate even through his helmet. What are you doing? Kivex demanded as energy readings spiked across all sensors. The power levels are exceeding all safety parameters. Safety parameters are for people who don't trust their engineering, Jack replied, watching his scanner closely. My dad taught me that the best engines aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that know exactly how far they can bend without breaking. The ship's structure groaned as the quantum drive's power output continued to climb. Jack's modifications were channeling the energy in new ways, creating patterns that would give Arcturian physicists headaches for decades to come. 7 minutes to weapons range. The AI updated. Jack made one final adjustment. Almost there. You see, Ambassador, there's something else humans learned from our primitive engineering history. The quantum patterns were approaching a critical point, the energy building like a wave about to break. And what is that? Kivex asked, unable to look away from the impossible readings. Sometimes, Jack's grin widened as his scanner showed exactly what he was waiting for. You need to stop treating your engine like a precision instrument and start treating it like what it really is, a controlled explosion just waiting to be pointed in the right direction. He reached for the final control. The quantum drive's hum had become a roar that vibrated through the entire ship. His jerry-rigged modifications glowed with contained power, channeling forces that the Arcturians had spent centuries trying to suppress. Hold on to your tentacles, Ambassador, Jack announced, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Because we're about to show those Drachnid ships what happens when you let a human hotwire a quantum drive. Jack flipped the switch. The quantum drive roared to life, not with its usual crystalline hum, but with a deep thrumming growl that reminded him of his father's restored charger. Energy coursed through his etched channels, creating a cascade of controlled chaos that lit up the chamber like the world's most expensive light show. This is... Kivex's hologram stuttered as the readings poured in. The power output is 30% above theoretical maximum. The quantum efficiency is breaking every rule in your engineering books. Jack finished, his fingers dancing over his makeshift control panel. That's because your books forgot the first rule of real engineering. The impossible just means nobody's been crazy enough to try it yet. The ship's AI chimed in with what might have been panic in its artificial voice. Warning: Drachnid vessels launching long-range targeting protocols. Time to weapons lock. 4 minutes. Through the chamber's viewport, Jack could see the hostile ships, sleek, predatory shapes against the star field. Under normal circumstances, the Eternal Harmony would have been an easy target. But these weren't normal circumstances. "All right, baby," Jack muttered, patting the crystal housing almost affectionately. "Show them what you can do when you stop fighting yourself." He redirected power through his modified channels. The quantum field responded instantly, rippling with patterns that would give Arcturian physicists nightmares for generations. But Jack saw something different in those chaos patterns. He saw potential. "Ambassador," he called out, not taking his eyes off the controls, "you might want to warn the crew to hold on to something. This next part is going to feel interesting." "What are you?" Kivex began, but Jack was already moving. He triggered his final modification, what he privately dubbed the quantum turbocharged overdrive. The ship's engines didn't just engage. They seemed to tear a hole in reality itself. The quantum drive's growl became a roar that shook the entire vessel. "Impossible energy readings detected," the AI announced, somehow managing to sound both impressed and terrified. "Quantum field coherence exceeding all known parameters. Drive efficiency at error. Unable to calculate." Jack grinned as he felt the ship respond. His modifications weren't just working. They were working better than he'd dared hope. The quantum turbulence he'd introduced was creating new patterns, new possibilities that the Arcturians' pursuit of perfection had never allowed. "Multiple weapon locks detected," the AI warned. "Drachnid vessels firing in 3, 2. "Watch this," Jack announced, and pulled his final trick. The quantum drive didn't just activate, it sang. All the chaos, all the turbulence, all the controlled imperfection suddenly aligned into something new, something that shouldn't have been possible according to every textbook in the Academy. The Eternal Harmony moved, not with the precise, calculated grace of a normal Arcturian vessel, but with the raw, unleashed power of pure quantum chaos channeled into controlled purpose. The ship didn't just dodge the incoming Drachnid fire. It danced through it, moving in ways that violated half a dozen laws of physics. "Sweet mother of mercy," Kivex whispered, all 4 eyes wide as dinner plates. "The maneuverability indices, the power curves, this violates everything we thought we knew about quantum mechanics." "Nah," Jack replied, his hand steady on the controls as he put the ship through maneuvers that would make a fighter pilot jealous. "It just proves something humans figured out a long time ago. Sometimes the best way to handle power isn't to contain it, it's to ride it." The Drachnid ships fell behind, their weapons unable to track the Eternal Harmony's impossible movements. Jack's modifications had turned the quantum drive from a precision instrument into something else entirely. A perfect fusion of chaos and control, power and precision, impossible and inevitable. "You know what the best part is, Ambassador?" Jack asked, watching the hostile ships shrink into the distance. "We're just getting started. Wait until you see what this baby can really do when we open her up." The quantum drive thrummed in agreement, its crystal matrix singing with unleashed potential. It wasn't perfect anymore. It was better than perfect. It was real. As the Drachnid ships dwindled to angry specks in the distance, Jack's modifications continued to rewrite everything the Arcturians thought they knew about quantum mechanics. The drive chamber pulsed with patterns that looked less like precise engineering and more like a controlled lightning storm. Beautiful, dangerous, and absolutely alive. The quantum efficiency readings. Kivex's hologram flickered as it processed new data. They're oscillating, but instead of causing system failure, they're actually reinforcing each other. How is this possible? Jack's fingers danced across his makeshift control panel, fine-tuning the chaos patterns. "Ever hear of sympathetic resonance, Ambassador? It's like when you hit just the right note, and everything starts vibrating in harmony. Except instead of sound waves, we're surfing quantum probability waves." A new alarm blared through the chamber. "Additional Drachnid vessels detected," the AI announced. 3 heavy cruisers emerging from FTL at bearing 030. "Perfect," Jack grinned, cracking his knuckles. Time to show them what this baby can really do. Ambassador, you might want to grab onto something metaphysical. This is gonna get weird. He reached for a control that definitely wasn't in any Arcturian manual. The quantum drive's growl deepened, and reality itself seemed to hiccup around them. The crystal matrix, etched with Jack's primitive modifications, began generating patterns that looked like fractals having an existential crisis. By all known laws of physics, PerfectHFY whispered, this should be tearing the ship apart. And yet we're flying smoother than a Cadillac on fresh asphalt. Jack finished. That's because your laws of physics assumed quantum energy had to be perfect and controlled. But quantum mechanics itself, it's messy, probabilistic, more like jazz than classical music. The pursuing Drachnid ships opened fire, their energy weapons cutting brilliant lines through space. But the Eternal Harmony moved like nothing they'd ever encountered. Each maneuver impossibly smooth yet utterly unpredictable, riding the quantum turbulence like a surfer on a perfect wave. The crystal matrix is adapting, PerfectHFY observed, his scientific curiosity overtaking his horror. The chaos patterns you introduced are actually evolving. Exactly. Jack's eyes lit up as he monitored the readings. That's what makes it beautiful. Your perfect system couldn't evolve, couldn't adapt. But this, he gestured at the swirling quantum patterns. This learns. Every minute we fly, it's discovering new possibilities. A Drachnid cruiser attempted to cut them off, its weapons charging. Jack responded by doing something with the controls that made several of the ship's sensors simply give up and stop working. The Eternal Harmony didn't just evade. It seemed to fold space around itself in ways that would give mathematics professors headaches. You've turned our quantum fold drive into some kind of quantum chaos engine, PerfectHFY said, his voice mixing awe and residual horror. The implications for theoretical physics alone. Less theory, more practice. Jack called out as he executed another impossible maneuver. Watch this. Remember how I said the turbulence channels could amplify power instead of just bleeding it off? He triggered his final modification. The quantum drive's roar became a song of pure power, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the Eternal Harmony moved. It didn't just accelerate, it transcended traditional concepts of motion. Jack's modifications had turned the quantum fold drive into something entirely new, a system that didn't fight chaos but embraced it, channeling it into pure, directed purpose. The Drachnid ships fell away like leaves in a hurricane, their weapons unable to track something that seemed to exist in multiple probability states at once. Now that, Jack announced with satisfaction, watching the enemy ships vanish into the distance, is what I call engineering. He patted the crystal housing affectionately. Not bad for a primitive human with a wrench. Huh. PerfectHFY's hologram was silent for a long moment, processing what he'd just witnessed. Finally, the ambassador spoke. Cadet Cooper, I believe we may need to revise our definition of primitive. The quantum drive hummed in agreement, its chaos patterns dancing like victory fireworks across the chamber walls. 2 weeks after the Eternal Harmony incident, Jack found himself standing before the Galactic Engineering Council, a gathering of the most brilliant minds from 37 spacefaring species. The chamber, typically maintained at perfect Arcturian standard temperature, felt unusually warm to accommodate the heated debates raging within. Impossible. Professor Zilithix's appendages whipped through the air. The modifications violate 13 fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. 14, actually, Jack corrected, unable to hide his grin. But here's the thing about laws of physics. They're more like guidelines once you stop assuming perfection is the goal. He pulled up a holographic display of his modified quantum drive. The crystal matrix, still etched with his primitive patterns, pulsed with controlled chaos that made several council members flinch. Look at these efficiency readings, a Varaxian physicist demanded, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. The power output exceeds theoretical maximums by 47%. The implications for deep space travel alone are just the beginning. Jack interrupted, expanding the display. The quantum turbulence channels don't just improve power output. They're learning, adapting, creating new possibilities every time we engage the drive. It's like, he searched for an analogy the council would understand. It's like we've taught the quantum field to dance instead of just marching in formation. Ambassador Kvex, now Jack's strongest advocate, stepped forward. We analyzed every aspect of Cadet Cooper's modifications. While unorthodox, they represent a fundamental shift in our understanding of quantum mechanics, the human approach of working with chaos rather than against it. The ambassador's facial tentacles rippled with what Jack had learned was profound respect. It changes everything. But the risks. Another council member protested. The unpredictability is exactly what makes it work, Jack finished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's old wrench, now becoming something of a legend in engineering circles. Sometimes the most powerful forces in the universe aren't the ones we control perfectly, but the ones we learn to ride. The council chamber erupted in overlapping arguments, each species bringing their own perspective to this revolution in quantum engineering. Jack watched with satisfaction as centuries of perfect theory collided with undeniable results. Order. The council head's crystalline form pulsed with authority. Cadet Cooper, or should I say, Professor Cooper. Jack blinked. Professor. The Academy's Board of Directors has created a new position, Chair of Applied Quantum Chaos Theory. The council head's tone carried what might have been amusement. It seems we have much to learn from Earth's unconventional approaches. Later, walking through the Academy's halls with Kvex, Jack couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of students, alien and human alike, poring over what was already being called the Cooper method. You realize, Kvex noted, that you fundamentally changed how the galaxy approaches engineering. The integration of controlled chaos principles into quantum mechanics, it opens possibilities we never imagined. Maybe, Jack smiled, watching a group of Arcturian students attempting to deliberately introduce imperfections into a crystal matrix. But you know what really matters. This morning I got a message from my dad back in Detroit. Oh. Kvex's hologram flickered with interest. Yeah, he said he's proud. And that he's starting a new course at his shop. Quantum Mechanics for Classic Car Mechanics. Jack laughed. Says if his kid can fix a quantum drive with a wrench, maybe it's time to start teaching mechanics to think bigger. The Academy's quantum lab hummed with new energy as they passed. Drives being modified, theories being rewritten, perfect systems learning to dance with chaos. And there, mounted in a place of honor on the wall, was Jack's wrench, displayed alongside the most advanced quantum measurement devices in the galaxy. You know what the best part is, Ambassador. Jack grinned as they watched a student successfully modify a quantum matrix using his techniques. What's that? We're just getting started. After all, he gestured to the stars visible through the lab's window, each one now a little closer thanks to his quantum chaos drive. The universe is a pretty big garage, and there's always something that needs fixing. The ambassador's hologram flickered with what had become his version of laughter. In the lab behind them, another quantum drive roared to life, its song no longer a perfect hum, but a powerful growl, the sound of the future, sparked by a human kid with a wrench and the courage to break all the right rules.